Okay, for the 20th of April, and I intend to record a video while cooking my lunch about economics. Yeah. I had just been talking for 3 minutes, but I had to restart the video because, yeah. I was talking about economics, yeah. Yeah. I was saying, so here I have to repeat what I've just been talking about for 3 minutes, but I had to delete the video because, yeah. Yeah, I make an ordinary talk because that's my lunch break. Sometimes I make lectures, sometimes I share my documents. And here that's just an ordinary talk. About economics. I speak partly as a cultural Frenchman in the realm of economics, namely the French overall are an economically illiterate people because of the tradition of Marxism and statism. Yeah, so the United States of America, there are many wonderful aspects, but one of them is the economic, the clarity of the economic thought in Austrian libertarian circles or free market circles overall. And most of the intelligent economists in France, there are not many, but most of them, they borrow almost all their ideas from Hayek, Mises, sometimes Friedman, Milton Friedman, the Austrian school at large, or the free market libertarian views. Yeah. And my problem with economics, namely the theoretical aspect of the economy, is when people become politicized for economic reasons, because they want more wealth, higher wages. Yeah, when economic struggles are being politicized, that's a problem. And historically, the United States of America, up until here, I've read a passage. I read a few chapters each day. This morning, I read. Maybe I can find the. Yeah, a passage which I thoroughly agree with. Mr. Deist, he says somewhere, maybe I will not be able to find again, but he says somewhere that the kind of views which have become widespread in the modern US, they wouldn't have been possible for Americans of the 19th century. Yeah, I just take a few. I will not spend too much time, but somewhere he says, rightly so, that there are a lot of things that the Americans have been forced one way or another to accept, which would not have been accepted or considered acceptable by classical Americans, one might say. Like the welfare state, central banking, redistribution, the income tax, the the gigantic overweight bureaucracy, the regulations, etc., etc. That's why it confirms my view that Mr. Deist is the archetype of the classical American. In my view, that's Ron Paul, but actually Jeff Deist is kind of the renewed version. Ron Paul with 30 or 40 years less, with a more... that's a renewal of Ron Paul. Ron Paul is the preserver of the American tradition, and Jeff Deist is kind of his ideological child. Yeah. The hero America deserves, but not the one it needs right now. Or maybe the hero America needs, but not the one it deserves. I don't know, but yeah. Shining knight. That's true. Yeah. So about the economy. America, he says in this book, it's kind of, I knew, but he confirmed actually that even in America, a lot of people, they are economically illiterate. That's not their fault. It's not the fault of the people. They have been brainwashed, but still. Actually, the very few rare intellectually literate, sane, rational, intelligent people about the economy, in terms of economics, they live in the US, or their ideas are most alive in American circles. Yeah. So my problem with the economy, the people, when they want higher wages or better living conditions, of course that's legitimate, but the problem is that in the modern world, it has become politicized. Actually, that's Marxism, the idea that it is through the means of politics that you can increase or improve your standards of living. But that's wrong. It's economically, here I make no judgment of value, but economically, it's an error, because politics, Hopper and Byland, they show this convincingly, and probably already Mises and Rothbard, the attempt to politicize the economy brings about economic destructionism, even if the people are well-intentioned. Here, Mises knew this. Bureaucratic, centralized regulations, it messes up with the economy, and it brings poverty. Then the politicians, they might say, economic wealth for the whole of society is not the primary purpose. There are more important things like social cohesion, military prestige, demographic enhancement, or religious piety, or whatever preservation of tradition, or whatever they might say, progressive ideology, yeah. But if the purpose is to be wealthy, then politics, when it meddles with the economy, it can only destroy. Overwhelmingly, one might say, it brings about destructionism, and it's counterproductive. The politicians, they cannot create wealth. Most of the time, the best they can do is to limit the damage, and most of the time they just steal the money from the productive forces, the entrepreneurs and the workers. They steal from one part of the population to redistribute to another. Politics is just organized, systematized, legalized theft. Yeah, that's why I've never been interested in politics in the sense of politician politics. For me, that's a waste of time. That's exhausting. Yeah. Here I agree with the libertarians. Their view, if I had to simplify without all the theoretical frame, the view of a libertarian is simply, I don't want to waste my time doing politics. I prepare my tofu, organic, bought locally at a solidarity shop to encourage local businesses. Yeah, and yeah, here I have a good joke. Excuse me, I just take a short break. I gotta take a leak. That's the joke. Yeah. Yeah, about the economy. I know what the ordinary people, or maybe not the ordinary people, but some members of the people in terms of economics. I read this, only the privileged can afford not to be politicized at all. That's brainwashing, because precisely the intelligent people, and the wealthy, honest, intelligent people. A lot of wealthy people, I'm not sure that they are honest. Some of them are, of course. Yeah, but honest, intelligent, and wealthy, usually the libertarians, precisely if they had things done their way, without meddling interventionism from politicians, they would bring about the institutional and moral and cultural conditions for the economy to prosper. And one of the aspects which is so appealing to, I've already said this, but to continental Europeans about the United States of America is that the US in the 19th century and up until the early decade of the 20th century, it represented the solution to the political problem, because even the poor, here I know that the poor in America in the 19th century, I'm talking about whites obviously, because with the legacy of slavery, etc., but poor whites, they were not as politicized as they were in Western Europe with Marxism, unions, syndicalism, socialism, etc., etc. And the US was rather peaceful socially in comparison with some of the violent clashes in Europe, France, England, Germany, Italy, etc., etc. Russia, obviously. Yeah. So it represents, in a sense, it represents an ideal of social stability. Yeah. And the problem, here I will cook my tofu, but the problem, I'll talk about the problem with poor people who politicize, or who use who politicize their grievances to try to improve their economic condition. It doesn't work, and I will talk about this. Yeah. About the people, I'm not talking about the white trash, that's the shirt I was wearing, but I'm not accusing white trash of politicizing, of using politics. Some of them do, but that's not the prominent feature. But I'm talking about any group of people who use politics to improve themselves. Here, Mises is clear-minded. It is the improvement in productivity enabled by the market forces, by capitalism, one might say. Here, I will not define rigorously, but private property, incentive for creating businesses, low taxes which encourage entrepreneurship, innovation, etc., etc. The free market, very few regulations or licensing, etc., tariffs, etc., etc., which enable entrepreneurs to develop and express their creativity in the economic sphere. It brings about a whole lot of wealth, and only then it can be redistributed, and productivity enables shorter working hours. So this is not the unions and the politicians who grant better social conditions to the worker, although they take the glory, one might say. It's the improvement in the economic structure which enable the workers to enjoy better living conditions. You cannot, here that's the deception of politicians, and they deceive themselves most of the time. You cannot legislate the economy precisely. If you go into a very poor country with very few capital investment, very few capitalistic structure, or low skilled workers, low human capital, very feeble institutions, etc., you cannot decide politically to say, let us have a 32 hours work week, let us have a minimum wage of $10, etc. You cannot, because in order to legislate, first the wealth and the productive ability have to be present. You cannot decide politically to change the economic structure, and when you do, most of the time it backfires. So there are a lot of politicians throughout the past century who have taken credit simply because they have stolen wealth indirectly or through legislation and taxes created by the entrepreneurs and the workers, and redistributed this to their fellow politicians or to some other parts of the population. But this is just theft. It's not production. Yeah, and the people, they get deceived constantly. When the poor people, when they complain about the capitalists, it's a little bit annoying, because the politicians, the very existence of politicians is some sort of a erroneous, one might say, economically. The wages of the politicians, the enormous amount of waste in modern Western societies with the welfare redistribution, the civil servants who maybe they do their job, most of them do their job well from a psychological standpoint, they are dedicated, they are honest, etc., but for structural reasons it's inefficient, and there are whole segments of public services which should not even exist. How many police officers, judges, welfare civil servants, and even military only exist because they are here to solve problems which should not even exist in a functional society. That's the welfare state denounced by Ron Paul and by the Libertarians. If a society was peaceful and not in a state of constant low intensity warfare at home and abroad, a lot less police officers and military and welfare bureaucrats would be required. A lot of politicians in a private property society, the politicians, they would not be needed. The journalists who are on the paycheck of the politicians, the crony capitalist, the enormous amount of money which is being stolen from the people and redistributed to big business by corrupt politicians, they steal the money from the people to redistribute it to their friends with special contracts, etc., etc. The wrong economic decisions and political decisions taken by politicians which have destructive effects for decades, and they are financed by the ordinary people. The people, they do not complain about this. They complain about the big capitalists because they see the wealth, the jewels, the boat, the luxury clothes, the beautiful cars, etc., which are shown in the media, a few celebrities, etc. And it's a target for their anger or their frustration or their resentment, but they do not see the enormous amount of money which is being wasted by the political class, which include the civil servants, it's not their psychological fault individually, but their job is most of them, it's a bullshit job from the perspective of the whole of society. Yeah. That's why here, my cultural French perspective, there are a lot of academics whose job consists in complaining about the rich. So their life expenses, they come from theft through means of taxation. They are financed by the state, actually. And their role, their job as academics consists in complaining about the rich. But the rich, here, the American Sanity clarified this, a lot of rich people, entrepreneurs, businessmen, etc., they make money because they provide services for customers. The politicians, or the scholars, or those who are on the paycheck of the state, they do not make money by satisfying consumers' demand. They make money through coercion, by state exploitation. The consumer is sovereign on the market, but the citizen is a subject in regard to the political class because he is forced to pay taxes. As a sovereign consumer, you are not forced to buy junk food, Coca-Cola, cigarettes, luxury products, jewels, etc. You are not forced, but you are forced to finance a bankrupt educational system, corrupt politicians, journalists, etc., etc. And the people, they don't see this. Yeah. And yeah. The very idea, it's the fact that the state controls the educational system, taxation, legislation, here Hans Hermann Hoppe is clear-minded, but how should I explain it? People who complain about the economy, usually they have gone through at least 15 years of school indoctrination by the state. So all their categories, they have been implemented through 15 or more so years of schooling, plus the media who are financed by the state, plus the big business companies which are in league with the big government, big government and big business, etc. So their entire mindset, plus the legislation which prevents certain topics from being discussed, etc. So the people, that's why I'm not a populist, because I do not trust the people, precisely because the people is the result of decades, if not centuries, of state-financed brainwashing. Yeah. Organic, locally bought tofu. Organic, locally bought bulgur. No, quinoa. Here, I don't know how you call this. Organic, locally bought in bulk. Onion, a leek. Organic, locally bought. Yeah. And about inflation, when a bank grants a loan, the quantity of money in society is being increased, and when households or individuals, when they repay their debts, the quantity of money is being reduced. But when a loan is granted by a bank, whose funds derive from the central banks, the quantity of money in circulation increases, which means that the quantity of the value of the money already in circulation decreases. When new money is created, the money which was in the economy, its value decreases. Because there is more, but the new money which has been created is not the result of savings and accumulated crystallized value, one might say. It's just scriptures on a computer or printing, but actually these are first writings on a computer and then printed eventually, not necessarily, because the printed money is only a tiny fragment of all the money, the scriptural money in circulation. So money can be constantly created out of thin air by the privilege of the central banks, which means that the money that people have on their bank account it's being constantly devalued because it represents a tiny portion of the entire monetary mass, but the monetary mass, if it keeps expanding through credit, your tiny portion of money, it becomes a tinier, although it remains the same, it remains a tinier proportion of the whole mass of money. So you lose purchasing power constantly because the quantity of money is being increased artificially by the banks, and this is inflation, and the consequence is being felt as an increase in prices because the businesses, the shopkeepers, the companies, when new money is created, the demand rises for those who receive the new money the first. Usually these are the privileged, the lobbies, the groups, the big business or big government. They receive the freshly created money, which at first has the same purchasing power of the money currently in circulation. So they spend this money at the current purchasing power, and to respond, it takes a certain amount of time to adapt, but to respond to this newly created demand, artificially created demand, the businesses, they increase their prices because the demand is increased and the supply is the same, so they increase their prices. And then those who receive the newly created money later in the process through circulation, etc., once they receive the money, the common people, the prices have increased because the businesses have had to adapt to the newly increased demand of those who receive the freshly created, artificially created money, which brings about an increase in prices. That's inflation, simplified. And this process over 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, the value, the purchasing power of a dollar, but every currency, €1 for the past 20 years, or any other currency, it is being constantly devalued. And that's where Ron Paul says in End the Fed, the book, that the dollar has lost 95% of its value since the creation of the Fed. So in broadly 1 century, with $1 of 1913, I'm not exactly sure of the number, but with $1 of broadly a century ago, you would have $21 today, something like that. And here this explains why intelligent people could see the trick. At least that's how I react. Why would you bother spend your life working jobs you hate to buy shit you don't need? No. Why would you spend your life if you have understood how the trick functions? It's a little bit more complex, but here I'm not even I'm too lazy to go pick up the book. Actually, no, I will pick up the books because I have cleaned my room. I have ordered my room. This book talks about this. This book as well. And here are 2 books that I've ordered recently, but I haven't had the opportunity to read yet. And of course, there's a book by Per Byland, How to Think About the Economy, which talks about this in one of the chapters as well. So, yeah, once you've understood the trick, the mindset is, why would you spend an entire career accumulating money? Because precisely through scheming, banking schemes, the value of the money that you've accumulated can be diluted by central banking policies, or even more by taxes. If a politician decides, oh, we'll just tax the rich, if you have spent an entire life accumulating wealth, if the politician, they decide to tax you for a redistribution, a social justice, a climatic justice, or whatever, you lose everything you've worked for. So it's not even, when you are young and you understand this, it's not even worth making the effort. So that's the problem of communism. There is no incentive to work in a communist society because you do not get rewarded. You even get punished if you produce, if you are competent, if you innovate, if you satisfy the customer's demand by providing them with goods and services that they value. In a socialist, communist, redistributive society, you get punished. And if you are incompetent, lazy, unable to make money on the market by providing others with value, you get rewarded because the politicians, they use you as a means to guilt the successful. Look at the people, they are poor because you are greedy, the rich, etc. That's a weapon of psychological warfare. And then it gives them a justification for their own power. So the politicians, they use the helplessness of the masses to have power, influence, wealth. And that's why the politicians, they are interested in dumbing down and downgrading their own population, because the more stupid the people are, the more powerful the politicians can be. the political class in every Western country is waging war against the healthy member of the society to favor the unhealthy, not physically, but socially, psychologically, in all sorts of ways, the unhealthy members of society, because a healthy society would not need politicians. Precisely, that's what the US were before the advent of modern mass bureaucracy. That's why the politicians have an interest, like I said, in promoting helplessness, worthlessness, incompetence, because they thrive on the helplessness of the masses that they rule over. And I'm not a populist, precisely because I'm not saying the people is right, the politicians are corrupt. No, unfortunately the people, no. There are very few healthy elements within modern societies. These are usually aristocratic libertarians. Since I have adopted a local, ecological, organic, fresh diet, I've lost a lot of weight. I've increased my walking ability. Since I've started making supplies, I can now eat at yesterday's prices, namely the prices of a few months ago. And in a state of constant inflation, that's good. Here, a little bit of German, the German peculiarity. You can shut off your ears if you don't want to hear, but since I use my organic German toilets, I can inspect my own, and the Germans, they historically they have been doing this. Zizek talks about this, the structure of German toilet, and it enables to look at your own, and you see if you are healthy or not. And since I've changed my diet, I've been rather healthy. So yeah, yeah. The slogan of my revolution: eat local, fresh, organic. Do not vote. Do not get interested in politics. Inspect your own feces. Read books. Drop out of school. Do not go to college, obviously. study science. Distribute food stamps of organic food, distribute good books. I've been doing this now almost daily. Pick up the trash. I picked this up this morning in about 20 minutes. These are cigarette butts mostly. If you, whoever you are, I've already said this. I'll keep repeating this. If you pick up the trash, the cigarette butts, the cans, the papers, the plastic in the street, wherever you live, if you do this consistently in your neighborhood, you will develop a reputation. People, if you do this you do this consistently for, let's say, 20 or 30 minutes a day, almost every day, people, they will appreciate your behavior because you clean the street. The old people, they will be on your side, because the old people, they tend to complain about the lack of education of modern generations. The shopkeepers, they will be on your side, because when there are trash in front of their gate, their shopkeeper's gate, it's not very inviting for potential customers, so they will thank you. Yeah, you can do this. I've been doing this for almost more than 6 months with a very high rate of consistency. And the purpose is simply because I don't like walking in dirty streets. But if you do this, there are other positive aspects in terms of reputation, etc. And if you have the opportunity to talk with random civilians, which I do when they ask me why I pick up the trash, I explain them briefly that it's financed through the taxpayers' money. When people get sick because they have a lung cancer due to long-term prolonged smoking, it's financed by medicalized, socialized healthcare. Yeah, and other reasons. You can also distribute shirts like these with positive messages. I've been doing this. Okay, it's been 45 minutes. I intend to produce a structured video this afternoon. I still have a lot of work to do. I will take a few minutes to read a little bit of Jeff Deist. Yeah. That's what I had to say about economics. If I wanted to conclude on a demagogic remark, I would say Look what the politicians do during their working hours. They watch porn or TikTok on their cell phone, which is well documented. In the UK they do this, in France as well, and I guess in the US as well. Maybe not so, because it's a little bit more serious in Congress, or it is supposed to be. But look what the politicians do with your money. That's a joke. They take leisure while they are supposed to work for the good of the community. But when you look at what they do with their policies, maybe if they don't work, it's better than if they do. Please, dear politician, do not work. Stop working. When you work, you only bring trouble. Yeah, so they take leisure while they are supposed to work. I do the opposite. I work not during leisure, but during my lunch. Can you top that? I'm not a demagogue. Because the people, for all the aforementioned reasons, they are easily manipulated, so be careful when I sound like a demagogue. That's not precisely because, yeah. Beware of the German demagogues of the past, present, and future. Yeah. No, more seriously, I will conclude with the problem with the economy is precisely that people, they have psychological reasons, legitimate reasons from a psychological standpoint to complain, but the problem is that they misunderstand. And yeah. Reading books like these, or Per Byland, or books like these, it really helps. And yeah. So I will try to make, but actually that's what I've been trying, consciously or unconsciously, to do, but try to make knowledge accessible. Which means partly entertaining, illustrated, and also accessible intellectually. Yeah, I will stop the video here.